How wars were fought before guns and technology. These days, a soldier can press a button and kill from a mile away. However, during 99% of human history, you had to be close enough to smell the copper in your opponent's blood in order to stop them. There was no long distance. Slipping on internal organs and experiencing the vibration of a bone breaking through your own weapon handle were nightmares of war. We're taking away the Hollywood clashing swords tonight. We are examining the unvarnished, horrifying reality of how wars were waged when the only technology available was a sharpened piece of dirt and your own muscle. Number 8. The wall of meat. Brace for the shove. Before technology, the most dangerous place on Earth was the shield wall. Archaeologists at the Battle of Whispy found skeletons with their legs completely hacked off. Why? Because when two armies lock shields, the only thing exposed is your shins. It wasn't a duel, it was a othismos, a mass human shove. You were packed so tightly you couldn't even breathe, let alone swing a sword. Men died of asphyxiation while standing upright, crushed by the weight of their own friends pushing from behind. The suspense was claustrophobic. If you lost your footing and slipped into the mud, you weren't stabbed. You were trampled into the dirt by 1,000 boots before you could even scream for help. Number 7. The sound of cracking eggshells. Listen for the thud. We see elegant sword fights in cinema, but real ancient war was won by blunt force trauma. A sword is a piece of jewelry that blunts against armor. A mace is a kinetic nightmare. Forensic analysis of the Battle of Towton shows that soldiers didn't die from heroic cuts. They died from depressed cranial fractures. A mace doesn't need to cut you. It sends a shockwave through a steel helmet that turns the brain into liquid. The tension in a melee wasn't the clink of metal, it was the sickening, wet crunch of wood meeting bone. It was messy, it was loud, and it was agonizingly slow. You didn't die instantly, you died from your brain swelling against your own skull. Number 6. The black sun. Scan the sky. Before the bullet, the arrow was the only thing that could delete you from a distance. But it wasn't about the sniper shot, it was about saturation. At the Battle of Agincourt, English longbowmen fired an estimated 1,000 arrows every single second. This created a literal curtain of iron. The psychological suspense was unbearable. You couldn't see the person who was going to kill you. You just heard the hiss of 5,000 feathers cutting the air. You had to tuck your chin into your chest and pray that the probability of a needle-thin point didn't find the 1-inch gap in your visor. It was a lottery where the prize was a piece of wood through the throat. Number 5. The invisible assassin. Take a whiff of the rot. Microbiology was the greatest murderer in ancient warfare, not the enemy soldiers. More armies were routed by their own latrines than by any opposing commander. According to historical records, 7 soldiers perished from typhus or dysentery for every man killed in combat. A campaign's tension was like a slow-motion race against your own intestines. In a state of perpetual biosuspense, soldiers witnessed their comrades disintegrate into skeletons without suffering any injuries. As a result, the Mongols engaged in the first biological warfare, launching decaying corpses from the plague over city walls and using the air as a weapon that no shield could stop. Number 4. The thunder of the 1,500-pound muscle. Feel the vibration. Imagine standing in a field and hearing the rhythmic thundering of 500 heavy horses charging at 30 miles per hour. A horse is a sentient battering ram made of 1,500 pounds of pure muscle. A cavalry charge was a psychological game of chicken. A horse, by instinct, will not run into a solid wall of people. Therefore, the rider's goal wasn't to ram you, it was to make you break and run. The second, a line of infantry flinched and turned their backs. The war turned into a slaughter. The suspense was in the stand. If you held your ground, the horse would veer off. If you blinked, you were crushed under a literal ton of muscle and iron. Number 3. The meat grinder. Count the calories. The most common way to win a war before technology was simply to starve a city to death. A siege was a slow-motion execution of an entire population. During the siege of Jerusalem, the city became a pressure cooker of madness. When the grain ran out, the social contract vanished. The suspense wasn't about when will the walls fall? It was about who will be eaten first. Daily life was a descent into animalism. You weren't fighting soldiers. You were fighting the ticking clock of your own stomach. Number 2. The chemical nightmare. Watch the water burn. Long before mustard gas, humans were experimenting with chemical terror. The Byzantines used Greek fire, a liquid flame that could burn on top of water and couldn't be extinguished by anything. If it touched your wooden ship or your leather armor, you were finished. In the Peloponnesian War, Spartans used sulfur clouds, burning pitch and sulfur to create a choking, toxic gas to drive defenders off the walls. The tension was the helplessness. You weren't fighting a man you could hit. You were fighting a chemical reaction that ignored your shield and melted your lungs from the inside out. Number 1. The post-battle void. Witness the aftermath. Once the glory ended, the real horror began. There were no field hospitals, no antibiotics, and no morphine. After the Battle of Waterloo, the field was covered in the harvest. Scavengers would roam the field with pliers, pulling the teeth out of the dead and the still living to sell them to dentists. The suspense for a wounded soldier was the long wait. You would lie in the mud for days, watching the crows circle, knowing that the minor cut on your arm would turn black with gangrene by morning. You were won the battle, but you were still losing the war against the dirt. We think our modern smart bombs make us powerful. But the men of the Iron Age had a level of raw, face-to-face grit that we can't even fathom. They didn't have technology. They only had the person standing next to them and a sharp piece of metal. If this deep dive into the brutal mechanics of ancient war hit you hard, leave your mark on the like button. It's the modern way of leaving your handprint on the wall. To join our tribe and uncover more hidden chapters of history, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Stay sharp. The ghosts of the battlefield are still speaking.